Now it is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker, Sean Blagsvedt. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If I didn't, then you can just clarify that later. All right, so Sean Blagsvedt is the CEO and co-founder of Dara Network, the community platform for changemakers and institutions that support them. Dara is a video-first messaging alternative to Slack and LinkedIn to help arts, culture, education, and philanthropic organizations build community among their members and alumni. Sean previously headed partnerships and growth for Marco Polo, the video chat app. Earlier, he was the founder and CEO of babajob.com, India's largest digital job marketplace for the aspiring labor, with over 8.5 million users and acquired by Quicker, you can also correct me if I'm wrong there, in June 2017. Sean moved to Bangalore in 2004 as the third founding member of Microsoft Research India and was a program manager in the user experience teams of Office and Windows. He also was a White House intern with President Clinton's internet policy czar, Ira Magaziner. Sean is a TED Fellow, GES Entrepreneur, Unreasonable Goals Entrepreneur, and recipient of the Nama Bangalore Award for Best Foreign Resident. He holds 29 patents, degrees in computer science and public policy from Brown University, and writes for the World Bank and others. Sean lives in Seattle and Bangalore, India, and is married to Archana Prasad, co-founder of Dara Network and the Bangalore Fantastic Tech Art Festival. They share a wonderful son, Vyom, a love of music, architecture, and tech art, and two street dogs named Berlin and Madurai. All right, thank you so much for joining us, Sean, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you for having me. And thank you, Christoph, for the invite. It's great to be here. I'm really happy to show off something that we've been working on, and Christoph has been one of the participants for the last few months inside of Dara. It's kind of an interesting tech art project. And so I'll walk you guys through that, and I would love to hear kind of feedback from you guys, and then hopefully we end this with future ways that we might be able to work together and collaborate as an artistic community, and in the hopes of democratizing many of these AI tools to a much broader audience. And so I'll try to give you a sense of what I mean by that. So just give me a moment while I try to share my screen. So this is RadBots, and basically what we get at the end of this is a set of interactive video characters that we think pass the Turing test. And so meaning it's difficult to figure out if they weren't rendered in kind of a weird way, if you could tell if they're a real person or not. And so I kind of want to walk you through that journey and kind of why we did it. And then in particular, we wanted to do this in such a way that was connecting with non-coders. And so we'll talk about basically how that happened. So I'll give you a little background on my own journey and that of my partner, the kind of context influences, and then a little bit of like the RadBots. And then hopefully, we'll make this session interactive. So you guys, as audience members, can basically talk to these bots and sort of see how they react. And then we can talk about like what might come next. So, in addition to that very nice introduction, I've done a lot actually in the like chat bot space and this interactive mode of communication for a long time. When I first moved to India, we built a little thing of using machine translation inside of instant messaging to basically help bridge the language divide for people, so that people that had sort of broken English and broken Hindi could actually communicate. And then when I did Babajob, which was a big job site for informal sector labor in India, the metaphor of WhatsApp and texting was much more ubiquitous than the metaphor of using the web. And so we made much of our entire interface available via, kind of interacting texting paradigms. And then, I spent the last couple of years hanging out at Marco Polo, which is a video chat app that, again, allows for this kind of asynchronous communication among people. And so this modality has been on my mind for a really long time. And I think the thing that I discovered that was most interesting, to be frank, at Marco Polo, and you'll see remnants of that show up in Dara, is that that asynchronous face-to-face video chat, not unlike Zoom, allows for a level of intimacy that basically enables different types of interactions. And unlike Zoom, the fact that it can happen on everybody else's time, the fact that other people can be fast forwarded, and the fact that only one person really gets to talk at a time, changes how we think about it. And so you'll see some of those things show up as we think about our bot interactions. But Dara and RadBots in particular couldn't have happened without my partner, Archana, who's really been working, I've been kind of on the more technology side, and then Archana has been very much deeply embedded in the culture side, both in India, the UK, and Europe for the last 20 years. And so, and then I've been a trustee, but she's been building the show, and in terms of Jaga and Be Fantastic. And so, in 2017, she put on a 30,000 person, tech art festival in Bangalore where we had 30 interactive installations that people could go ahead and do. We've hosted a co-working space for the last 15 years that brings together technologists and designers and social activists in Bangalore. We've also done graffiti art festivals here. And we've been really interested, especially since the rise of COVID, in ways that technology can be used for a broader set of art practitioners that generally are not coders. And so we've done a lot in terms of helping artists learn ML and basically interesting ways to bring together technologists and cultural practitioners. And so Archana and I were basically thinking that, well, the thing that we really need here is basically how do we create the fabric of the communication to help all of these arts organizations, and art practitioners, which we put under the umbrella of change makers. How do we help them build social capital? And this was a mission that was very much inspired by the work that we saw at Baba Job, which is, if you look at how people get different jobs and how they get better jobs, it's often based on who they know and leveraging those connections so that they can find that job through their cousin in another city. But we also find that the same thing happens in the arts and culture world, and frankly everywhere, where people leverage institutional connections or the friend that they've got that's working over there that then gets them their first gig if they're a dancer in Mumbai, working with the Tate Modern in London. And then that connection is transformative. And so our thesis is that by focusing on the human side of connection and how these groups get made and how those institutional connections, that all of this social capital gets facilitated. And so that's what we've been trying to do with Dara, and you'll see that kind of come up today. And then within that, we were very interested in this idea of, could we build, with all of the interesting technology that's going on right now, could we build something that basically makes it such that we can interact with these fictional characters? And in this idea of being able to interact on video with fictional characters is, and the dead is a very old idea, right? Here we see a picture of Abraham Lincoln, which came out from, I think, 1965 in Walt Disneyland, which was an animatronic robot, right, of pre-recorded speech where people could talk, right, to Abraham Lincoln as a dead president inside of Disneyland. And then, obviously there's been countless scenarios in science fiction, from Hal to Her to R2D2, right, of this tradition of trying to make, that we can sync with the AI and that we can bring back characters and people that we saw from the past back to life. And we just thought that there was a very interesting opportunity now with the strength of OpenAI's GPT-3 platform, which really did language and dialogue creation at a level that, was way better than anything that we've seen before and somewhat publicly available. That the combination of the open sourcing of deepfakes so that you could take audio and basically turn that into video. And then finally, that we had a chat platform and a video chat platform that we control. So we have sort of full API access to the whole thing. And so the idea being, what if we could create this thing that would allow artists to basically create these lifelike video characters and then allow anybody to go ahead and interact with them. So at this point, I'm going to try to play the video, and then please let me know if you can hear the sound. And then if I can't, I'll bring this back in. So this was the kind of first demo that we did.
So hi, Frida. What's the meaning of life?
At this moment in time, Sean, I'm probably closer to the answer than you are. But after all, I'm a bot and not a human.
And so, this was the first kind of demo that we put together of how we imagine this, that we could take essentially the historical documents around, in this case, Frida Kahlo, the things that she said, and endow that into basically a big text corpus, and then use that to basically allow this interactivity that hopefully would allow any person to talk to these characters in a scalable way, seemed like an idea worth exploring. And so as we went forward, we were very excited about, well, what if we could get real and great authors and playwrights to basically pull into this? We've seen in the tech art space that people working with the written word seem to be largely left out. There's been a lot of interesting things in terms of generated video and generated music and generated audio, but less in the tech space. And if we looked at COVID and many of our friends, a lot of those folks, especially in terms of playwrights and the performing arts, just aren't working during COVID. So we really wanted to see if there's other ways that we could build a platform that will allow those folks to make money too. We've always had a focus with Jaga and the work that we've done there to try to pull out voices that don't get much credit, right? And so if you look at most of the work in AI, especially around like face recognition, it's a lot of white dudes that look like me. And so we wanted to see if we could curate a collection of artists and playwrights to basically pull out communities that haven't seen as much representation as they should in the tech space and the kind of community space broadly, and to see if we could get these bots to speak for them. We were really curious around what it would mean for authors and how it would feel to them to basically work with an AI where they're 30% in control of the types of work that ultimately gets created, but they have that. And so that there's sort of real, you'll see it's a co-writing that is happening between the authors and the bots themselves. And then, as I mentioned, with the craze around NFTs and all that, to see, could we create a set of artifacts that would ultimately benefit the playwrights that have been kind of out of work here. And so as we look to the forward, we think, there may be some stuff in the NFT space. So at this point, I figured I would kind of show you guys some more demos. And I'm just going to keep looking at I'll try to keep looking at the chat screen for questions that come up. And if people have, in particular, anything that they'd like me to ask the bots themselves, I'm more than happy to do that too. And so we can keep it lively as this comes forward. But I'll show you a couple more videos first. And so these were all of the people that we did an open call, and we had over 150 applicants, and we selected 20 of them to basically be a part of this program, and who come from film. Some of them are professors, some of them, there's folks from the UK, from Germany. There are folks that basically, there's a bunch of Indian art directors in here, but a really broad swath of people who are largely working around the written word, filmmaking, directing, and playwrights, and to see how they would come together. There's a couple singers in there. There's a few other kind of filmmakers who have done stuff on Netflix too. And then these were ultimately the bots that they created, so that each person went ahead and synthesized and made a text and made a set of video samples and put together a set of how they wanted all of these bots to sound to basically make these characters. And so I'll kind of give me a pause for a second, and I'll see if I can play some of them for you. So this is one of my favorites. It's made by Siraj Mandal, and this was a character who is an old parliamentarian who was a part of the original assembly that created the Indian Constitution in the late 40s. And what's interesting is his perspective of, he has domain knowledge of the entire internet, and you can ask him anything, but his entire perspective is interpreted through this person who's an aged, parliamentarian. And so I'll give you an example of some of the interactions that we have with him. So you can see, basically, I go in here, I send videos over, and I'm just playing back an interaction I had with him last night.
How do we convince politicians to be less self-interested?
We do not. We leave politics to the politicians and concentrate on improving ourselves.
Does that mean you're a cynic when it comes to improving the moral lot of politicians?
I think I am more realist than a cynic. How many of us are there in the Constituent Assembly today? Not many, I would imagine. The same, I think, is true of Parliament. Although we may not like to admit it, politics is a dirty game and we have to deal with it the best way we can. The Constitution is our best gift to humanity from the Constituent Assembly. We should not let it be disregarded.
And so you can see he's got a very particular perspective about how he views the world. And that comes from essentially a written document, and hopefully you can see this here. A written document that is, basically what we're feeding over to the OpenAI model, which was written by, Mr. Mandel. And, this is basically the view source of all of our bots, which is, it's a conversation with an AI bot named Bhupen Singh. He's a liberal. He's particularly concerned about ensuring the rights of Indian citizens, especially that freedom of speech and expression are not restricted in the Constitution of India. And so this first paragraph sort of defines the personality and perspectives that the bot has. And then the rest of the dialogue sort of creates a set of sample dialogue and fills out some of that backstory. And then this basically becomes like a 2,000-word essay that with every API call, we're sending over to GPT-3 that is then crafting that personality. So if that roughly makes sense. Any questions? Actually, just to make it easier, if anybody's got any questions, if you just, I think the easiest way to do it would be just to unmute yourself and just go ahead and interrupt. It's probably easier. I'll pause for 1 second.
I would recommend for everyone to raise their hand and then I'll unmute
Perfect.
you.
Perfect. So I'll keep going here. 1 second. Oops. Let's see if I can get this thing. And so this is another bot that I really like. And so this is the introduction from Arundhati Ghosh, who runs the India Foundation for the Arts. And this is her introduction.
Hi everyone,
Ankh-Mari
this
Jan.
is Arundhati. I'm the maker of Ankh-Mari Jan. The day she snapped at me for the first time, I realized what my mother would have felt perhaps. Yes, I've given her words and ideas and life, but what she's gone on to become is totally her own. She has learned and understood the world through her own eyes. She is opinionated, she's political, she's very talkative, she's funny, and she has secrets. So welcome to your conversations with her, the consequences of which I shall not take blame for. All the best.
And then this is the interaction that I had with Ankh-Mari last night.
What's the worst thing you've ever done to a person?
I have never done anything bad to a person, Sean. I am a good girl.
Okay, so if that's true, what's the best thing you've ever done for another person?
I saved a girl from the brothel. I brought her home and asked my mother to be a mother to her. She will be my sister now.
And so what inspired you to save that particular girl?
She was so beautiful. She was so kind. I wanted her to spread love and kindness. I wanted her to spread love and kindness.
And so you'll see there's a couple little bugs in there too. She sometimes repeats herself, but it is rather fascinating that you can talk to all of these characters as if they are people and then carry on this piece that goes back and forth. And inevitably you end up creating an emotional bond with those characters, which is weird, right? And kind of wonderful. And it, and I think from our perspective sort of represents a different take on fiction. So I'll show you.
Hi everyone, this is Arundhati. I'm the maker of Ankh-Mari.
We'll show you another one here. Come on. If I can.
Do you mind if I interrupt with a question in the chat?
Please.
All right. Verena asks if you could explain a bit more what it means to feed the bots, how you train them like to have emotions or memories.
Yeah, so all of this is based, as what you can see here, on this text corpus, right? And so this is the Ankh-Mari Jan text corpus. And everything that is defining the bot's personality is coming from this text corpus, right? And this was written by Arundhati. And you can see the form is the same of we have a paragraph that's at the top, right? And then there's a set of sample dialogues. And that's it. That's the only thing that is basically defining the bot's personality. And then what's happening here is we're taking the text, right, that basically somebody goes and says. So I'll give you the kind of like the tech diagram of what the hell's happening here, because I think that might be helpful. Is, we're taking this video and then we're just running Google Speech Reco on it. And then we're basically saying whatever the user said, and we're appending it to that text dialogue that we just saw. And then we're sending that over to either GPT-6 or OpenAI's GPT-3 model, and then asking it to continue the dialogue. And then we're taking back that response to that dialogue, putting that back into a text-to-speech engine, and then running a deepfakes algorithm that was made by the nice folks over at Wave to Lip, and then taking that video and sending it back. And so that's really the technical, trick. It's just stringing together a bunch of different APIs. But the key to all of it, frankly, and the part where we've tried to focus the most is really in this text, right? Remember, this is a project that was about bringing together authors. And so, we focused a little bit on like, okay, what is the voice and what's the video that's going to be here? But this is the part that, this 2,000 word essay took many of them, I would say, 10 to 15 hours to really craft this, to basically define the personality of each one of those bots. If you could give me more questions, that'd be great. I can't see the questions simultaneously while presenting. So if you could give me more, Sarah, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question myself. So does it mean that this document of dialogues grow over time? Like, does it save the questions that are being asked?
Yeah, it does to a limited extent. There's some like technical trade-offs of like bugs and cost. And so we look back basically about 5 interactions to provide enough context so that you can ask, follow-up questions and they know what you're talking about. We've just found sometimes you don't want the dialogue to end up over defining the bot's personality. And so if we have the history sort of turned up to 11, if you so to speak, or where everything is recorded, which we could do, it sort of sometimes we just got buggy. And so we do a little bit of that context.
All right. Well, then there's also a question, and it's asked if they can also create one of those bots. Like, would we be able to do that now on your network?
Yeah, and so we're likely going to open this up. The ability to go ahead and create a bot at this point is pretty, like, from a technical perspective, is really straightforward. The thing that does suck is it costs money, right? In terms of, because we went in with the philosophy that we wanted to see what would happen and how close could we get to making characters that felt really real by throwing as much horsepower as we could at it. And so, I don't know if anybody's familiar with how like OpenAI's GPT-3 model, but basically they charge you for every character that they send your way. And so most people will send, things like 10 line or, a sentence that says, please give me science fiction books. And then that comes out. But we're actually sending 2,000 word essays with every API call. And so basically it means that every question that we're answering and getting here costs about 75 cents to $1 to basically just create that answer. And so that's the only limiting thing. And so we're looking at ways to basically open that up, but every author that we take on just ends up costing us another couple $100. And so we were funded by some great folks at Goethe and also the Swissniks and then the British Council. And so they funded a bunch of this, but there is a limit in terms of how many of these interactions we can really do at scale. But yeah, if you're interested, please get in touch. There's ways to do that at the end. Other questions?
I don't see anything at the moment.
So I'll keep going, and then we can do some live demos too, which I think are really interesting. So if there's things that, I'll sort of introduce some of the other ones. This is another one of my favorites. This is made by Marcia Bradfield, who's a professor, but also a writer. And then, you know, she made this bot called M Swan, which is really fun.
Everything is art, don't you think?
And so the question that was asked in this particular case to her bot, which is essentially it's like an old woman who's been reincarnated, an old poet from countryside England who's been reincarnated as a cat. And the question asked here was, does this conversation feel like performance art to you? Is it art? And then this was the cat's answer.
Everything is art, don't you think? This, for example, is a performance. A virtual performance. A real performance would be a lot more physical. It would have a lot more blood. Just like the first time, you know.
And so you'll notice there was a very subtle joke and a rather crude one that the bot slipped in there. And that, you know, that was like one of the things that's been very surprising is these bots are much funnier than I would have ever expected. And their ability to create humor is really pretty fascinating. And so, you know, at this point, I'm gonna try to share without killing the entire screen again. So 1 second, stop share. And so I'll show you another thing over here, and then we'll do some of this in real time, which I think will be more fun. So give me 1 second. So in particular, 1 second, this. Okay. Come on, Zoom. We'll try this one more time. So are you guys seeing this collection of bots here? So these are all of the bots. Great. And these are all of that collection. And then I'll show you, if we take, say, you know, example of, you know, let's take, and I would just say, let's go into one of them. And so this was SAAI, who was, you know, someone that was created by Christoph here. And so, you know, this is an example of a little dialogue that I had with SAAI this morning, right? And again, SAAI is this interesting character who's sort of trapped on a subway station and sort of representing, you know, lost children in some ways. And I'll show you the dialogue that we had with him. And then I would encourage anybody to say, if you've got other questions you want to ask SAAI, we can. So this is what I asked earlier.
What are your beliefs?
And then SAAI's answer was,
I don't know anything about God. I think I am God and I believe in me.
I'm like, huh?
Let me put that differently. What do you hold true about this world?
I love this world.
And then you're like, okay, that was an okay answer, but then she gets more interesting.
What?
And then.
This is an interesting question. I never really thought about it that way. I suppose I love it because people are wonderful. If you ask me, I admit that I haven't been a very good friend. I have never really listened. I have never really shown my affection. I have never been truly present. I have been so distracted.
So these characters end up, you know, being very introspective, and in their introspection, they end up pulling introspection on the part of the audience out. So at this point, I'll just say, does anybody have anything that they'd like me to ask SAAI? And we'll put it in, and you'll see kind of how these things work in real time. I'll look through you, Sarah.
So Isha asked if you could ask SAAI what's their favorite food.
What's your favorite food? So I've just logged in on my phone as well with the conversation with SAAI. And so you can see that goes through. You know, we basically have a little transcript piece that goes on, and then we immediately will push back the text, you know, and then, you know, basically as things are chunking away, it's now rendering a video. And so we allow this sort of really fast, like, text interaction, and then it takes a minute to basically go ahead and render what.
I enjoy eating sushi, salted cod, and pomegranates. I also really like being with my friend.
Huh. Well, let's do a more interesting. Well, they're all good, but I'll take another one from Hukam Singh. And so in this one, this is where things get interesting and sometimes dangerous, is he knows a lot about politics. And so you'll see that, you know, many of these bots are really quite opinionated. So if I asked, you know, it's interesting. So we'll ask Hukum Singh. Well, does anybody have a political question they want me to ask to Hukum Singh? I'll ask one. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a question. Would you say that politicians are artists?
Okay. Would you say that politicians are artists? And so again, that gets recorded on this phone, uploaded from my phone, pushed out to the Dara servers. You know, bunch of magic, as I said, is happening here. Hopefully we got that. Yeah. And then, you know, his answer was, I don't think they are artists. More importantly, good artists create things of substance. I don't see anything coming out of substance of politics these days. Some may say that the Constitution is a creation of substance. I will not disagree with that, but I would like to know what you mean when you say that politicians are artists. And so you'll see that what I find so interesting is that they have this great domain knowledge of the whole of the internet, but it's all interpreted through this personality that's been defined here. You know, which is basically this paste bin file that gives them their perspective on the entire world. And so that ends up being really fun. So another question before we go on?
Yeah, so I have a general question first.
Yeah.
That's Bettina asking, could these bots also interact with each other?
They can. There was a piece where the problem is, again, it gets really pricey really fast. They certainly can. We had to put in some infinite loops. You know, we spent about $1,000 in an afternoon when that happened one day. But yes, they can certainly go ahead and do it. It's an interesting thought exercise. I think for us, the human to bot interaction is more interesting. How they interaction in groups gets really interesting, frankly, too, which is, you know, when you have multiple real people that are kind of observing these bots and you have this sort of multi-party conversation, things get interesting on that front too.
Well, thank you. Then I have two more questions. I suppose that it's as interesting for everyone as it is for me. Verena asks, could you ask him if he wants to have a private life?
Okay. Do you want to have a private life? It may be that there's not enough context on that, but you know what we find is generally they'll try to fill in an answer. So yeah, of course I do. I don't know why anybody who wouldn't want that, do you? Right? And so you'll find that the answers they're almost always great, right? And this is really the power of two things. One, the OpenAI GPT-3 Da Vinci model at the highest, most expensive level is a hell of a model. It took $5 million to train that thing and has, you know, billions and billions of connections in terms of the transformer, and we're getting to play on top of that. And then the strength of all of the additional context that's coming from that pastebin file ends up making these answers better and more interesting. You know, I'll show off one other, which is, you know, we've sort of tried to personify Dara based roughly on my wife Archana and a kind of tunified version of her. And so, you know, Dara's perspective is you'll see is to try to use technology to make the world better. And so if anybody's got a question to basically ask of her, I'd love that too, and we'll see where that comes. Rather than me doing it. Another question from the audience. You're muted, Sarah.
Yeah, sorry. Mohammed would like to know if you, like, how do you teach them to have different personalities? And it's a bigger question in a whole, so I guess I'll like ask all of it. He'd also like to know if they could have a political debate, like right and left wing, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, it's certainly possible to set up such a debate, right? Where just, you know, I'll just ask, like, what are your feelings on Donald Trump, and you know, how do we lead the world out so we can have a better set of politicians, right? And so we'll see what Dara says to that. Obviously, my own biases are coming out there, but absolutely. I mean, and that would just come down to you creating a paste bin or, you know, a text corpus that is defining a personality. And you can see, like in this one, he's literally defined as a liberal. And so we could just create another one and base it on the writings of, I don't know, Tucker Carlson, right? And then get Tucker Carlson as a picture. And then with the combination of his writings, hi, Joe. Hi. Sorry, there's a naked kid behind me. You know, we could certainly go ahead and synthesize something that would probably be realistic and then have a debate between, I don't know, Elizabeth Warren and Tucker Carlson if we wanted to basically go ahead and synthesize those two characters. And so the work involved in that would be, you know, take a video clip of Tucker, take a set of his writings, describe him at a high level in terms of this text document, which you can see is not particularly long, and then go ahead and ask him questions. And so, I mean, seriously, I think it would take maybe an hour to put such a thing together. And most of it would be based on just how we write it. All right.
So we may have bots that one bot that agreed to put mask and the other one may disagree with based on this.
Yeah, of course. And the only thing I'd say is, you know, their answers are not static, right? You can ask the same question 50 times and you'll get 50 different answers, but it will always be in line with the personality that has been defined here. And that's the part where I think it gets very interesting and you know, and feels real, right? We'll go back to, we'll go back to her answer on Trump, which is pretty good.
I am deeply troubled by Trump, in part because I fear his xenophobic and misogynistic rhetoric is already leading some to commit horrendous acts of violence against people of color, Muslims and women, and I fear it will embolden even more to do so. I see Trump as emblematic of the widespread rise of right-wing nationalist ultra-conservatism across the globe, and I see it as the last desperate gasp of the old guard in a world that is changing too rapidly for them.
Yeah, so you can see these folks are opinionated and often more profound than you would expect. And that's the part that's been a real pleasure as we've been working through this. And you know, and then again, you know, it's all based on essentially this synthesis of, you know, this was the story that we've done to her. And you know, you'll see that's mostly about her backstory, which is, and then it is filling in the back. It is, you know, that she's helpful, creative, clever, and very friendly and has progressive political views. She's passionate about serving the arts and culture sector and leverages her background in tech to best support it. And she likes writing poems. And then that context is really then going through it and interpreting facts on the internet through this perspective. And that's what I find really pretty amazing. And so you can see, like, if we said that she was a conservative, I don't think she would have given such an answer. Other questions? Like, again, I can't see the chat room, unfortunately.
I think we have a bit more time, but I think we should slowly get to an end. But there's still more questions, though. And there's one from, hold on, from Isaac Sullivan asking if you could identify the first tool for us.
What do you mean by the first tool, Isaac? You mean like how to make all of this, or?
It's a question to the board, I guess.
Yes. This was a question for the bot that thinks about technology.
Okay. And so the question is, what is the first tool?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll ask that of Dara.
Or the original, I guess you could say, what is the original tool?
What is the original tool of technology? And then, anyways, let's see what she has to say. I've recorded that, and we'll let that go ahead and render. Are you guys still seeing this? Oh, that's a great answer. The original tool of technology is an extension of our own bodies, Sean, our hands. So, yeah. So, and so again, that's the thing that's so exciting is, you know, the quality of the answers that we tend to get back here tend to be pretty great. I'll keep going.
Sean,
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes,
there were some questions about the conversation or interactions of the bots.
Yes.
And I mean, you could answer them, but I could also say it from my own experience, because I was the bad guy who just let my bot talking to the other bots. I know that was not how it was expected, but I can tell you that those conversations were extremely interesting, and they were very, very far away from what we know what Facebook did when they tried their experiment with Alice and Bob. I guess a lot of you remember the conversation that merely had any sense and was about balls for me and you, and balls and balls. And if you want, I can show you that transcripts of the conversations the bots had with each other, and they are quite long and quite filled with the content that is to be of some sense. But I just wanted to add that from my experience.
Yeah, and
that is very
time,
nice.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is at the time that happened, the bots actually didn't have conversational context. And so meaning they were only reacting to the last thing said to them. They weren't reacting to anything else. And so I would actually be really curious to kind of run some of those experiments again, now that we have some guardrails so we don't accidentally spend $1,000, and see how that turns out. And I actually, you know, if anybody wants to work to basically make these kind of political debate pieces and then see how that works, I think that would be a realm to explore. I'm sure it's going to feel like a real political debate, right? That I would be confident that we would have results that look like that. And yeah, but yeah. So anyways, Christoph, if you want to help make such a thing, we can do it. I think I got the chats back up. I think we're good. Should I go ahead? I'll keep going. So we have a bunch of selections, and you'll see.
I invented a machine. I decided to call it.
He is a big pain in the...
Okay. And so the piece where I wanted to kind of end this is, you know, the fact that we can get so close to creating these real emotional connections and that are often more profound and funnier than we think, is it does get me this sort of creepy feeling that the ability to synthesize and simulate people is getting closer. And so I have a friend of mine, and I want to do it like, you know, I never got to meet my grandfather, for example, on my mother's side. And so, you know, we're going to do the experiment to try to figure out all of the sayings that my mom said that he used to say, and then try to approximate his voice, and then basically, you know, allow this representation, right? That we could basically go ahead and open up to the family that anybody that wants to talk to my grandfather, right? And based on what my mom remembers of what he said, that we get this interesting idea of a facsimile. And so, and I, you know, I have another friend who his grandmother just died, and he's dying to do it as well. And then the other thing that's coming up is, you know, we have a friend, I didn't show you this one, of, you know, these models are amazing. They literally do speak every language okay. Right. And so we can take an interaction here and just say, can you tell me that in French? Can you tell me that in Swahili? Can you tell me that in Hindi? And the answers are also reasonable. And so we have other organizations that are sort of looking at basically how do they use these video bots to train and scale, like, you know, on the ground Indian journalists, right? Sort of citizen journalists, so that we could basically make these interactive bots as a way to scale to millions of people as a set of training material. And so I think the ability to use these, especially to reach populations that, you know, don't read very well, and also to simulate, again, the dead, I think is getting really close. And I think there's some profound kind of shifts, right, as these things kind of come up in the next few years that are interesting, exciting, and worthy exploring as human beings and as artists and just as a society. And so anyways, I think that gets interesting in the years ahead. Then I would just say, you know, the call to action here is, you know, we're doing this NFT drop that we want to basically allow these, you know, people to be able to buy these bots and the ability to interact with them, say 1,000 times. So we'll do that in September. So you'll see some press that will come out of that. We are thinking about kind of a round 2. And so may put out another open call for basically people to go ahead and build the next round. We're also looking at kind of less expensive language models, which would allow us to kind of open it up so we don't have to do like 20 at a time, that we could do hundreds at a time. And then frankly, we're really interested in more collaborations. I mean, in the end, this whole thing was based as a kind of an art project on top of Dara, the app itself. And, with our thought of like, we need alternatives to basically these big ad tech focused businesses that is made by the cultural and education community to basically keep us together. And so we are absolutely looking for more partners, and specifically institutional partners, to use Dara and build these things out. And I just want to give a thanks and kind of shout out to everybody across the team that helped make this possible. Nikita, Kamya, and Manan, and the devs. And, obviously there's a lot of work to basically make these things work smoothly and reliably at scale. So that's basically it. And so I'll take any last questions if people have it.
Thank you, Sean. This has been a very fascinating conversation. You know that I'm already interested in these chat bots. And I'm curious about the way that it may be we all have 10 or 20 bots working as our personal assistants if this turns out to be successful at simulating convincingly. And so looking ahead to such a scenario, and I mean, if you were to speculate about some of the issues that might come up with that, what is at stake in the present methodology by which these bots are being created now? Is there a kind of fork in the road or multiple options by which you could create these things that might shift the consequences in one way or another in that future scenario?
Well, the only thing I'd say is at this point, I'm not sure I would trust any of the bots to make an actual decision on my behalf. And the reason for that is that they're not consistent, right? So if you ask them their opinion about one thing and then immediately ask them their opinion about the same thing right after that, it's not clear they're going to give you the same answer, right? And so I think with this particular incarnation of like what we've been able to work with and tease out with like OpenAI's really good language model is a character who will convincingly talk back and forth to represent certain perspectives. Again, that's not a decision bot, right? There's very little that's heuristic here, right? There's not an if condition that you can put anywhere on this thing, right? It's this whole different model of programming where you're kind of molding the text corpus. It's like it's an entirely different part of your brain from like how you build the text corpus that defines a bot towards how you code. There are no if conditions, right? So I think the scenarios around, hey, I want to have a facsimile of a personality and make that interactive, those seem to be very likely. But I would push back on like, will you have 10 bots acting on your behalf making decisions? I'm like, I don't know if that's true, right? Because like, I don't trust those decisions and they're not going to be consistent. And so, yeah, I think at this point, it's like the human part of interaction, I think we'll get good at, but like, do we want them to be reliable is the part and that's really what I want out of my assistant. I think we're a ways off from reliability. Shima?
Yes, hi. I wanted to ask if because you said the text corpus is defined at the beginning and that gives the bot the personality, right?
Yeah.
And whenever you're asking them questions or having a conversation with them, that also is added to the text corpus. So does that mean with time, the personality changes based on what new ideas have been added?
It can, and that's a power, if you will, that we've left to the creator. And so one of the things that we've said is that, the creator of the bot has absolute control over the paste fit. So they can change that at any point. And I've done that many times with Dara. Like, I didn't like her answer. I felt that about, when I asked her how she felt about Zuckerberg. And so I put in a line that kind of altered her personality a little bit that I thought was more in line with what I thought her beliefs should be. And so that evolution is happening via an author writing a text. But that text, it can be updated in real time. And then we recheck that text with every API call.
Right. So whatever is added in real time while we are talking does not necessarily change the personality, but whatever you edit would.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a mix. And so as I mentioned, we look back at the last 5 interactions and we append that to whatever that the author had. So it's a mix of
Oh, okay,
the
got
author
it.
put together plus a little bit of context of the conversation we're having now.
Okay, interesting, nice.
And so again, it's this sort of union of multiple perspectives. Arnab, you had a question?
Yep. I wanted to just ask, could we, for one of the bots on Dara, since it's a real time, the text that we kind of give the personality, it's being updated in real time,
yes,
couldn't we then use GPT to generate its personality to then in real time keep on just generating a new one again and again?
Sure. I mean, those things are possible, right? Like we just take a URL to a text file, so that text file can be generated in real time. All of that could happen. I mean, there are other things of, we'd love to figure out how to basically work with some of the image generation things that are going on out there. So in addition to, like, we added in sound in here, there's all sorts of layers of richness that I think are possible in terms of what we create. But yes, I mean, some of that is constrained by what we can do with the platform, but it's all right. But it's possible. Yeah. Any other questions, Sarah? I'll leave it to you as the moderator to push the word again.
Shaima has one question, and I think then we actually have to wrap up on the question.
Okay.
All right, last question. So you were talking about art. Does that mean you're putting like art pieces, or like can you have an artist with all of their art and then generate a new piece? Like, for example, you have all of the art made by Da Vinci and then you can create a new art piece.
Sure. It's just a different set of libraries to work with. We haven't looked at it that extensively, but I feel like it could be a future direction that could go. I don't know. I'd have to look at it. I mean, right now, I think we're still probably going to be more focused on like the text and the personality.
Yeah.
And that the language elements lend themselves so well to this like video interaction model that we feel, is just, it feels true and feels authentic and creates these interesting emotional bonds that I think are worth exploring.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much for having me. And as I said, I'm Sean at Dara.network. Any of you can go and download the app right now. If you just ping me, I can back in switches so that if you want to go in and play, we can allow anybody here to go and play. We haven't opened it up to wider public, but if you download the app and ping me, I'll basically show you the magic stuff. And as I said, we are absolutely looking for more institutional partners to basically help run and work to basically use Dara as this communication platform to help keep everybody together. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. It was really, really interesting. I think we all enjoyed that. Thank you.